Buenas tardes. Bienvenidos a mi clase. Mi nombre es Roberto Mackenzie y esta mi casa. Yeah, I'm speaking my very limited Spanish to you. I'm saying welcome to my class. I said good afternoon. People in Mexico always say good afternoon. If you don't wave to somebody in Mexico, actually you're not wishing them good health, which is also to say that you're not wishing them good health if you don't wave to them. So yeah, this is a Mexican way to start the class, and I got my Mexican margarita glass. There's nothing, standard about it. It sits kind of wonky. Handmade though. Same with the wine glass here. I give this one to my mom because it has ridges on it. It won't slip out of her hand. And we have beautiful Mexican pottery. Yeah, it's all hand painted, lead free. You can actually put it in a microwave. You can believe that. This dip tray is amazing. Put some salsa in there, some avocado, some guacamole. Yeah, I have a deep affinity for Mexico. That's why I have all this stuff. I've been going to Mexico since I was a kid, on the border of California and also Texas. And most recently, since 2007, my family and I have been going down there twice a year to Mazatlan, Mexico, on the Pacific coast. I just love Mexican people. And I love the way of life in many ways in Mexico. So it's with a lot of pleasure today that I approach our subject, because we're talking about Mexican entertainment media. And actually, there was a stage in my career where I was a hired person, a consultant, who was hired by, get this, the U.S. Embassy and the U.S. Consulate in Mexico. I was hired to go down to Mexico and conduct some workshops for journalists and people who were media practitioners and some people who had open ears for media regulation. We're going to be talking about media regulation today. And I went all over two states in particular. I went all over the state of Mexico. They say there are three Mexicos. There's Mexico the country, there's Mexico the state, and there's Mexico City. That's the third Mexico. So I went all over Mexico interviewing people. And I also went to a state called Veracruz, or Veracruz, the way that the Mexicans pronounce their V's. And that state was also very interesting to go around. I talked to journalists. I met with people in television. I spoke with professors. I spoke with legal experts. I spoke with regulators. I spoke with a lot of people from the U.S. Consulate. I was actually doing my research for a book that I wrote called Comparing Media from Around the World, which I normally would be using in this class, but it's out of date. And the publisher didn't want to renew it. So we used the book that we're using instead. But at one time, I was going around Mexico interviewing people for my material on comparing media from around the world. So I have kind of intimate knowledge of Mexico as we go through this material that I want to let you know about. And it's a country to be reckoned with in Latin America. I mean, it's got the second largest media market in all of Latin America. And you can guess the biggest one, right? It's Brazil. So Brazil's the biggest country. Mexico's second biggest telecommunications and broadcasting market in all of Latin America is the second biggest one is in Mexico. And they have a large penetration capacity in Mexico. And that's a term that's used to refer to how much of the population do you get to with your media distribution platforms. So like telephone service may have a certain penetration rate. They actually call it like 90% of the public has telephone service. And we do the same thing with media and across the board for radio, TV, cell phones. The penetration rate is pretty high in Mexico. And by the way, in this class and others, we're bringing into the discussion telecommunications, or the use of telephones or telephony as another media form that we're studying. I mean, that's how people are getting their entertainment today more than anywhere else, right? So through their cell phones. So we're starting to do that with Mexico today. And this broadcasting sector in Mexico is a big part of the Mexican economy. Like the Mexican economy really relies on broadcasting and telecommunications to bring in a lot of revenue that is for the betterment of the country. There was a big period of time around 2014 that involved some reforms to Mexican law, and these reforms took place after I was in Mexico. I was in Mexico in roughly the 2005 time period, so it was interesting to me to read the reforms that have taken place. Basically, the reforms, if you want to say it in a nutshell, they took away two direct government entities under the control of the executive branch of the government, which is to say the president. And those two government entities used to regulate radio and television. They used to give out the licenses. They used to decide what the laws were with regard to what frequencies you can broadcast at and what mergers could take place and just a lot of stuff. And that meant that the government had direct control because these agencies reported to the executive branch of the government. Well, the reforms that took place in 2014 basically moved these agencies away from the government, made them autonomous, renamed them, and now they are autonomous, like the FCC is supposed to be independent and autonomous here in the United States. Same thing with these two agencies, and the law itself is called Ley Federal de Telecomunicaciones de Radiofusion. Yeah, my pronunciation is not the greatest there. It also established an agency, that one of these two agencies. The first one established one agency. That's what's the agency's name? Don't have it in my notes here. But the other one is called the Federal Commission of Economic Competition. So that's an agency that's seeming to speak to the practice of economic fairness in the country, but specifically it has a say over the broadcasting sector, which is really interesting. You'll find out why. So also part of these regulations are we now have more foreign competition coming into Mexico. Prior to these regulations, back when I was visiting Mexico, you don't have the ability of a U.S. company to purchase part of a cable channel on the Mexican system. But now that is allowed. And so Mexican domestic media companies have foreign competition within their own country now. Now, this is why. This is why we have to talk about Mexico as being a country where there are laws that are trying to guarantee fairness. And the why is because Mexico, not just in the broadcasting sector, but really throughout politics and every other industry, has had a history of monopolies and dictators and single person, single entities controlling everything throughout government, everything. I mean, they had one political party for it was 91 years. The PRI was a political party for 91 years before Vicente Fox finally came in and broke that system up. So there's a lot of tendency towards monopolies and oligopolies in the Mexican market. And you read this chapter, you'll see that that's the case. So, and of course, we want to give a big nod to the telenovela, as Mexicans will pronounce it. That's that soap opera form of programming. It's fiction that Brazil also produces, going all over the world. The Mexican telenovela is one of the most famous kinds of media content across the world. And right now, people are watching telenovelas in the United States, so across all the states. So there is this monopolistic structure. Let's start first with the television industry. You've got Televisa. There's really only two companies, Televisa and Azteca. Azteca has a big chunk, but it's only 20% of the market because Televisa's got 80%. So we have two companies dominating most of the market. And within that, just those two companies, one of them is dominating most of what those two companies are dominating. That's Televisa. Over on the telecommunications side, the phone sector, you've got a person, Carlos Slim is his name. He's actually Lebanese, and then he emigrated to Mexico. He owns an airline. He owns an airline called Volaris, Volaris. I've flown on it many times. And he owns a cell phone company called American Mobile. Isn't that interesting? He's called his company America, right? Mexico's in America. It's in North America. Why should the U.S. have the only right to call ourselves Americans? His company's called America Mobile, and it's got 90% of the market in Mexico. That's by definition a monopoly. So this law was supposedly trying to open up the telecom and the broadcasting industries to more competition, try and break up some of the monopolies. It's had limited success. One of the rules that was, one of the regulations that's part of this law in 2014, the Federal Telecommunications and Radio Fusion laws, I think I have that right there. One of the other side regulations is the must-carry rule. The must-carry rule says that if a network broadcaster like NBC is providing its signal for free, like you can pick up NBC and ABC without cable. If you live close to Philadelphia or New York, there's an over-the-air signal. That's how people used to get their TV content, and it's still available today. If a network provides that, then by law, according to Must Carry, the cable channel, if it requests that programming from NBC or whatever the Mexican network is, the network has to provide it because it's providing it for free anyhow. You can imagine the network wouldn't want to do that, right? Because then people will get it by subscribing to cable, and NBC or whatever the Mexican company isn't getting a piece of the pie. All right. Also, this law was supposed to open up broadband for more digital TV broadcast. This is a concept you may not know about, but the way that broadband, the way that digital TV is broadcast is through a frequency, and that frequency only has so much room, even though we can't see it. It's electrical, but it has only so much room. That's called the band, the broadband. Just like we have the FM band, the AM band, yeah, the shortwave band. You have a band for television. They opened that up so that there could be more competition because it was all clogged up with the companies that currently had the rights. The law also, for the first time, recognized four different areas of media regulation. Four different areas. You've got commercial, you've got public, you've got social. And I thought that was very interesting, breaking apart social media, making it a separate area of regulation. And you've got private. That's going to be cell phone use. But none of these regulations, the author contends, really make it equal for people with poor income to be able to have protections by the law. And in Mexico, you have a lot of poverty. You have really what you have missing in Mexico is a middle class. You have a very, very rich class, and you have a lot of poor class, a lot of poor people in Mexico. So those people are not covered by the regulations. There's no protection for them. Like a lot of countries, including the United States, Mexico passed a law in 2015 forcing all television networks, television content providers to shut off their analog signal, to shut off that analog signal and convert to digital. That happened here in the United States as well. And to help the public, the Mexican government actually passed out 10 million television sets to people with low income to help them convert over to digital TV. Here's a TV set. And I got to tell you, Mexicans love TV. I see people watching TV in Mexico all the time outside. They'll run an extension cord across a parking lot and put a little TV on a car. They're looking at phones just as much as everybody else, but the television is a very big part of Mexico. You ride a bus around, you've got a TV monitor playing recipes, playing funny little skits that are going on. So back to the Mexican broadcast market, we basically have what we refer to as a duopoly. A duopoly is two companies controlling everything, even though this law opened the door for a new network called Imagen TV, Imagen TV, and it still hasn't been able to make many inroads. I mean, Televisa still dominates. It's still dominating, particularly the fiction genre. And I think that's an interesting way to look at television, isn't it? Instead of calling it sitcoms or instead of calling it crime dramas as we do, breaking these things down, it's all fiction. It's non-reality. Even reality TV is fiction TV in our country. All right, so we got those two companies dominating in television. Similar story, not so much in radio. We got 9 companies dominating most of the radio market. And then similarly in cable and satellite, we got 9 companies, 9 Mexican companies dominating most of the cable and satellite offerings that are available. So the book is really making a case that that Mexico is really controlled by an oligopolistic structure, very difficult word to say, including big companies like Telmex, which is a cable company, Megacable. Telmex is a cell phone company, sorry. That's a landline company and a cell phone company. Megacable or Megacable, which is a cable company, and then American Mobile. Those are the 3 big players. So the law also is controversial. There was a law that was passed later on that was supposed to create some rights for the audience, but it actually ended up taking rights away from the audience. So the audience being average, everyday people who can be covered in the news and made fun of or misreported on or treated in some other way that's unprofessional. What happens in that case, right? So the law it provides 2 areas. One is an area called the creation of a position called an ombudsman. Should be woman, ombudsperson, but ombuds, O-M-B-U-D-S, ombudsman. That's a person who's supposed to represent the public to a media organization. If a person believes that they've been slandered or they've been talked about in an unfair way, they can go to an ombudsman. The ombudsman can get the media organization, if the ombudsman is empowered to make a correction. If it's a newspaper, to print a retraction. If it's a broadcast, to come back and say we want to correct an error. But the law actually put the power of the ombudsman in the hands of the media organization. So the media organization can listen to the ombudsman's recommendation and say, yeah, we're not going to do that. Thanks very much. So that's why I say the law is weakened. And then the other area is it allows media organizations, this law, to determine their own ethical codes. Mexico has had a big problem with, for example, separating between opinions and facts. When I was writing my book, I interviewed a person from the U.S. consulate, and she said, I was just watching a story last night on the Palestinians and the Israelis. There was a skirmish at the border, and the reporter reported on the skirmish and got to the end of the story and said, those two have never been able to get along. That's just opinion. That's just flat out opinion. Now, certainly there might be some truth to it to some people, but in the context of a news report, that is not, and that's the kind of thing that I was advising on when I was doing my consulting work for the U.S. Embassy, is how to separate between fact and opinion. And ethical codes are supposed to do that. Each organization will have ethical codes. The average news organization, for example, will have a rule against accepting gifts that are more than $25, for example, because then you're susceptible to blackmail, right? So ethical codes are produced by organizations, but this law lets the media organizations develop their own codes rather than making it national. I think that's mainly the author's opinion himself coming through in this article. So to round things out now, the competition that is going to be happening to Mexico is going to be coming. It will take a while to erode, the authors making the case, to erode the share of the audience that Televisa and Azteca have and Carlos Slim's company, but it's bound to happen because there's competition coming in from abroad. There's competition coming from new commercial companies in Mexico, and there's also competition coming from public television and radio stations, especially since they've gotten into the fiction genre. Yeah, imagine NPR and PBS getting into fiction. I mean, they do it a little bit, but it's like masterpiece theater, right? It's very elite. Whereas this kind of public broadcasting is getting into edgy stuff for young people. Public broadcasters getting into that kind of content in Mexico, creating more competition for these oligopolies that have previously existed. And that'll wrap up our talk on Mexico. Que tengo buen día. Have a great day.